Hi everyone! For today's video, we will be discussing about a book by Noddings. So in case you don't know her, let me show you a picture of her. This is Noddings. She is an American educator and philosopher, and her work focuses on the ethics of care. So today, the book that we will be discussing about is her book on the philosophy of education. We will be focusing on the first chapter of this book. So the first chapter presents different philosophers or thinkers existing before the 20th century. So who are those philosophers? So she included in her discussion Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, who else? Rousseau, Pestalozzi, Herbart, and Froebel. The main highlights of Nodding's discussion on Chapter 1 includes or poses perennial questions such as what are the purpose of education? Who are to be educated? Who are the targets of education? Does education needs to be individualized? Like, should it adjust according to the students' needs or interest and abilities? And what is the purpose of the state to education? Noddings on her writings argued that those perennial questions requires philosophical analysis, so it should be answered through philosophical perspectives for reflection and clarification, not just using empirical data. So there was a very long discussion on about Socratic method as the foundation of critical thinking and self-knowledge. However, if you really look at it, every philosophers before the 20th century had varying or differences of beliefs. Like for example, Plato and Aristotle, they are more on a structured or state-directed education. However, those other philosophies like Rousseau, Pestalozzi, Froebel, they are more on or they emphasize the learner's natural development, or they are more on the individual freedom of every learner. So they really have opposing philosophies. These opposing philosophies help Noddings connect historical or past debates to modern concerns such as school choice, so promoting equality in education, as well as how do we process different social needs and individual interest with regards to giving a better type of quality of education. As we know, in the modern world, there is a very diverse set of students. Now, based on my personal experience, in relation to Nodding's arguments, so she emphasized perennial questions like what is the purpose of education, who are to be educated, or how should education be adapted to the different needs and capabilities of the learners. So it actually resonates with my experience in school as a student and as an educator, as a current teacher. So before, when I was still a student, I often wondered why. Why, for example, students in health sciences like nursing or medtech, why do they have to take subjects like mathematics or arts, right? So I myself wondered when, for example, if you major in chemistry, why do you have to take programming subject as a minor subject when basically maybe it's not really needed? And there are also other subjects that supposedly should be taught, but they are not being included as a mandatory subject. Like for example, if, there is this debate about financial literacy. It is actually very applicable in the real life, but it's not really included as a minor, even just as a minor subject in school, right? And also, as an educator, now that I teach in the tertiary level, so um, each of us teachers has her or his own type of teaching. So I often see teachers who are really having their classes by the book, and there are also teachers that enjoys the Socratic type of classes, like they always ask questions, and like it's really a discussion type class. But as for me, I like students to do experiments, like to really stand and be active in class. So it means that we really have different ways or teaching strategies, which relates to Nodding's question on education being adjusted a to the current needs or capabilities of the students, as well as education being continually examined, since the world is constantly changing and the students and the learners are in different generation are also changing. That's why education or the structure of education should always be examined. As we go deeper in our discussion on Nodding's philosophy of education, let's analyze how she was able to express so far her views. So basically, I really appreciate how she emphasized that the questions presented earlier, the perennial questions, can be answered through philosophical perspectives or values based reasoning. Because some other people would insist on using numerical data. However, we are talking about the interests of the students. So it's very useful to know about the different philosophical perspectives, which would help us answer those questions. And aside from that, Noddings was able to balance her insights on traditional way and innovative ways of education. Like for example, the Socratic method, which is still foundational, especially in classes that requires heavy discussions, not just rote memorization, or not really conceptual, but requires reflective thinking. But of course, since there are diverse students or diverse classrooms, we also have to adapt innovative ways. Like for example, we adapt to the needs or capability of the student, depending on what the subject is. And aside from that, Noddings is very insightful in her explanation because she would always she focuses on asking questions or open-ended questions. However, some would not agree because other would like to have clear steps, procedures, or clear kanang answers to those questions. Like they don't want to have it open-ended, so they want to really know what they would do. So meaning Nodding's approach is both a strength and a limitation. A strength because it promotes dialogue or open-ended questions promotes more discussions and reflective thinking. However, it is a limitation because some educators would want to have clear steps, clear goals, clear instructions on what to do. Like same with having a structured type of education. Now that we have learned a lot about the philosophies existing specifically before the 20th century, so how can we apply those concepts in today's education? Let's go back with Aristotle and Plato. So they were focused on a structured type of education, right, or the traditional one. That type of teaching actually is still useful in the present situation. For example, subjects like ethics, citizenship, makabayan, or like values education. So character education, they are very useful in those subjects. So since those type of curriculum or courses actually help students become better citizens or better individuals. So those subjects inculcate values to the students, improving their character and becoming prepared in the real world or in a democratic type of society, especially in the Philippines since we are a democratic country. With regards to catering the different needs and capabilities of the students, the philosophies of Rousseau, Pestalozzi, and Froebel, which promotes individual freedom, learning through experience or learning by playing, this is actually very useful in today's education since we are now in an inclusive type of education which the schools can implement individualized education. So this would give them foundation on implementing project-based learning or personalized learning to cater the different or the diverse interests and abilities of the students. Another example is that of Socrates on his Socratic method. So that is still actually applicable in today's education, most especially in subjects involving humanities and social sciences. So open-ended questioning in this method promotes critical thinking, reflective thinking, and collaboration with other learners. And that open-ended questioning is also applicable to the teachers themselves. Aside from the learners, the teachers should also constantly question themselves. So in order to reflect on their values, if they are still competent in their teaching, or are they still giving the right teaching strategies to the students? So these all of these learnings actually helps the teachers as not just the students to be able to um, teach effectively and efficiently. Nodding's discussion on chapter 1 is basically mostly insightful. However, there is this one topic on school choice and vouchers, which is quite controversial or compelling in relevance to our current situation. So, as you know, there are actually vouchers given, giving percent discount for student who ranks first, second, third, fourth, or fifth. Like for example, if you rank one, you're given 100% voucher discount when you're enrolled to college. Or if you rank 3, you're only given, let's say, 30%. If you rank 5, you're only given 10%. But if you don't belong to the top 5 when you graduate, then you are not given any voucher at all. This is quite controversial because it actually promotes inequality or division. What about the other students who got high scores, but it just so happens that they did not belong to the top 5, but they were able to pass the standard? So I'm not totally against, but if as much as possible, we should remove rankings. And if you really want to help the students, why not give them all vouchers? If not really 100%, like give them all vouchers, or you give vouchers depending on the financial capacity of the student. So it's quite controversial because there are many factors that we should consider about that. So it means that Nodding's discussion actually challenges us not to focus on individual satisfaction or high test scores, but to focus on social consequences involved on every educational changes or reforms. Before we end our discussion for today, let me list some questions which I would like to be further discussed based on Nodding's discussion about philosophy of education involving philosophies before the 20th century and connecting it to our modern world. So, the first question that is very relevant for this one is that how can you balance common curriculum with individualized education? Like for example, you have to employ common curriculum in order to have all the learners connected for social cohesion, like for all students or for the society to be connected and they feel belonged, they feel that they belong. And how do you balance that with individualized curriculum, since there are still students that needs special needs, right? So how do we balance that? The next question I would like to leave to you is that how or in Nodding's writings, it is also considered that the state has roles to education. So to what extent do the state dictate education, and where does the roles of parents or local roles would come into play, or where do they come in to that? And lastly, Socratic method is a very useful strategy in teaching, since it promotes discussion and reflective thinking, right? However, how are you able to adapt this to a very large audience with diverse students in such a way that you do not, or in such a way that other students are not being intimidated with a fast-paced discussion type of class? So this has been a very insightful discussion. Thank you so much for listening. So let's end here for today. Thank you.